I followed them with my ears till they came into the bedroom and would hit me sitting in the corner playing with dolls.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Psychic Point of View. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Lamport. I am the producer of the psychic show Rescue Mediums, amongst other things. And on The Psychic Point of View, what we try to explain and go in depth about is anything to do with parapsychology, the paranormal, and try to explain the unexplained, what seems to be the unexplained. And just bring you different guests. And we have an incredible guest here today. So over to you, Jackie.
Hi, so I'm Jackie Dennison. You may know me from the show Rescue Mediums, but I'm also the host of this show with Michael Lamport. And today we are welcoming a lecturer at Northampton. Is it Northamptonshire or Northampton University?
University of Northampton.
The University of Northampton.
They really play. Every university really plays around on which way the university is. It's a big deal.
Yes.
University of Northampton.
And I don't want to insult anyone. I want to respect everybody. We have Dr. Callum Cooper with us today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what kind of work he does in his research. Because you're a senior lecturer there at the university, aren't you, Cal?
That's right. Senior lecturer and associate professor of psychology. And I head up a third-year optional module that we have in parapsychology and anomalous experiences. We've got a whole host of different specialist modules and a research team that's geared towards this area as well, called Exceptional Experiences and Consciousness Studies. So that's psychologists interested in parapsychology, transpersonal psychology, which is religious and peak experiences, consciousness studies, cognitive psychology, and neuroscience.
Wow. My brain's already buzzing. So for those people who don't know, what is a parapsychologist?
So just like with psychologists, there's no kind of legal holding on the title. Unfortunately, people end up calling themselves it when they're not it. But a parapsychologist is someone that looks into experiences or abilities that appear to be currently outside of the realms of conventional scientific understanding for those psychological processes or physical processes. So we try to look at what seems like paranormal when it's not, via what we know psychology misleading us, or even environmental effects making us think we've had a strange experience. And it's essentially a branch of psychology that's geared towards sifting the wheat from the chaff and saying, what do we know? What does it look like in this case that seems to go beyond that, either from a day-to-day experience or trying to test the claims in a lab? So that's what we do. And its original title started out more so as psychical researcher, and you still have people calling themselves that because we have the Society for Psychical Research that was formed in 1882, which is still going today. I sit on its council. So you might hear it as psychical research or as parapsychology, and that's what we do. We look into these experiences or abilities.
It's really, really interesting, though, because you try to get the facts to either prove or disprove maybe a theory, which is sort of similar to what I do, you know, because I'm a clairvoyant medium. And so I believe that I connect with the spirit world, who give me information for me to, to help people. And that's my job, is to help people. However, I also like to have that backed up with as much fact as I can get. So if I believe that a spirit is telling me something, I would like them to go on and maybe get a researcher to find out whether that actually happened. Did that person ever exist? And did that happen to that person when they were alive on the earth plane? So it's a similar sort of thing, but just coming at it from a completely different angle. So I love the research type of things that you're doing. And I really applaud that. I know one of the things that you do is something with the consciousness or an altered state of consciousness. You've done some experiments with flotation tanks, haven't you?
Yeah. So to go back on the mediumship side of things, that was certainly one area that the early psychical researchers, if they were working with a medium, there were case studies and reports that would go on for pages and pages. These were really hefty reports they would publish in their journals and proceedings. And they would research those elements to the nth degree. They would go and look at burial plots. They would look at the information of gravestones. They look at death certificates, family trees. They would really explore that mediumship information as far as they could to look at what was going on and see, are they just picking up generic information that's available, or how specific is this? How could that medium have known? So that was the early days. They're more modern days of parapsychology. When it comes to the flotation tank or Gansfeld, these relaxation techniques, this is taking the general population. This is an idea from early on with the Rhines in Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, when they said, look, we have these people professing psychic ability, but people day-to-day report things. So let's see, is psychic ability the product of the population, or is it of the select few? And actually doing these studies from early Zener card test, what's on this card, what's on this card.
Yeah.
So then you can demonstrate that actually the population are very good. Generally, you can see in a group of 100 people that overall that group score can be very good. So what we're doing with the flotation tank is just another form of the Gansfeld. Gansfeld, you're in a reclining chair, you're relaxing with a red light on you, and eye shields and headphones that give you a relaxation procedure, and you hear white noise, and you're meant to be focusing on a target you're told is going to be out there. It's for you for that session, and you're not told what it is. Usually no one knows what it's going to be, but you just got to talk about your hallucinations, your visions, your sensations, anything comes to mind. The tank does the same, but you're in there naked, in the dark, for an hour, floating in Epsom salt that's such high quantity that you're buoyant. It doesn't matter what size, weight, shape you are, or what position you lie in the water, you are not going to sink. And it's the blood temperature. So you don't feel hot, you don't feel cold. And this is why people report perinatal experiences. It's like being in a giant womb and having a rebirth experience, but really good at instantly promoting hallucinations. It's used for people in sports, for cricket, for football, you name it. They go in there for relaxation before a match, just to gear up on their goals and their intention of the match. It's used for surgery recovery, back pain. It's really good with helping with anxiety. It's got a number of uses. But for this, we play on the hallucinations. You have hallucinations in the tank. Are they from here, or do they come from out there? And if they're coming from out there, let's put it to the test.
But in the tank, though, Cal, wouldn't it be... you would be put in a meditative state, I would imagine. Like you would meditate. So what is the difference between meditation and an hallucination?
Meditation takes practice and sometimes years and years. To be someone that has really achieved true enlightenment and meditation, you could be meditating for 40, 50 years plus to really start to understand what meditation is. And it's not just sitting there closing your eyes and thinking about being calm or trying to think of nothing. The tank is an instantaneous sensory deprivation environment. You have no choice but to be absorbed in the darkness, to be absorbed in the sensation of floating because you are floating. And you have no choice but to engage with the hallucinations because you keep your eyes open and your eyes are trying to find anything it can make sense of, but it's pitch black. So all you see is like it's sort of a blue, gray, hazy. It's like looking into a kaleidoscope in a way. You just get this and your eyes try to focus on it, and whatever you're thinking, which potentially might have a psi aspect, becomes part of your field of vision. So it requires no practice, no training. Just go in there, shut the lid, listen to the relaxation noise for 5 minutes, it will disappear, and then you're just left in pure darkness. And then it's whatever your brain produces. Meditation, practice, time, dedication, discipline, routine. It's a different world away.
But these hallucinations could be very scary, I imagine.
Some we found that, initially you can get some people that are very intimidated by going in the tank, very anxiety provoking because it's water about 1.5 foot in depth. You're going to shut the lid, which is very big, and it's darkness, but we've looked into something called the highly sensitive person, which there is a scale for this, people that are very sensitive and maybe easily provoked and anxious. But it's like when you queue up at a theme park and you're waiting in line for a big roller coaster and you take a friend who's never really been into it and say, come on, try it out. And they're nervous all the way for the hour wait for what only lasts a couple of minutes. But you don't, come on. And they're the one who least wants to do it, but you beg them on. But they get the most out of the experience. They talk about it for ages after and say, oh my God, that was so exhilarating. It's the same with the flotation tanks. We found that with the more apprehension in the tank, the more you'll get out of it, because you realize that anxiety can go nowhere but down because you can't go anywhere. It's like coming over a phobia. If you're exposed to the phobia, all that's going to happen is you will put up with the situation. Actually, then you realize it's not a threat. You could turn it into a positive. Even people that are told, just hold the spider for a bit. Realize it's not doing anything though. That's how you get over it. It's called flooding. And, it's not going to do anything. It will walk about, it might sit still, you might examine it more, and you realize what I instantly assume is a threat isn't. And the same for the tank. It's not a threat. I know there are safety procedures. I know I can just sit up if I want to. I know I can just get out if I want to. But those people embrace the experience a lot more because they don't know what's going to happen. It's all that panic and worry. Ordinarily, in an ESP study, anxiety has been found to be a hindrance. But in these kinds of studies where it's an engaging environment, it's a novel stimuli, it's the opposite.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I personally, as Jackie knows well, I have severe arachnophobia. But I've been thinking about it in a different way, because if I see a spider, I used to not even be able to say the word, but they are very solitary creatures. So part of my heart now sort of goes out to them. And are they around the house just to say with their legs, hi, do you want to be my friend? Because I have no friends. And if I look at it that way, they don't scare me as much.
They're also looking after your house for you. They're killing off the bugs that are actually not good for the house, and they're good for the ecosystem. And they're always, obviously we're big compared to them. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. And if you ever want to get over the phobia and hold them, it's actually good to start with the opposite end of the scale. Start with tarantulas to hold, because they are a completely different kind of thing. They're a bigger form where you can actually see the details a lot more, and they're a lot more gentle and slow moving than a spider, which is quick because it's only being quick because it wants to get away from you.
Right.
It wants to hide.
Right. It wants to run. Yes.
Terrified. So it's just that slow. You can either slow introduction for a phobia, or you can flood. One or the other. Lots of it and you can't get away, and actually, it comes down, or steadily, that little bit, I'll get that little bit closer.
Now, you've also studied and written extensively about telephone calls from the dead. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
I've got a copy of your book right here.
Don't
that
lose
you signed this for me
10
many
years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I love it.
When I was reading that, because telephone calls from the dead I find interesting, but is there an uptick since mobile and cell phones were introduced in telephone calls from the dead, or is it about the same before mobile phones came into the picture?
Yeah, it's the same. The only problem with our modern phones is that they're so open to manipulation. That there's many things you can do now to remove sender information, to send a message via different platforms. It's not just text message anymore. You can send a text message on WhatsApp. You can send it through Snapchat, Kik, Skype, you name it. Anything that's a talking social media platform, you can send messages that's effectively all coming through your telephone. But the types of calls and messages people receive, in terms of what's the message, what's the context of you losing that person, or even a strange telephone call from someone that's very much living, they seem to be quite consistent. There's only so many themes, and there are about 4 or 5 different themes of things that people experience. So even though the technology advances and the phenomena advance with it, it hasn't changed really. Just the means of manipulation, if it's called.
If there is a telephone call from somebody who has passed, have you researched any people that had experiences in actual conversation, or is it just a message over the phone?
No, they're back and forth conversations, some of them. So prolonged calls could last up to half an hour.
Wow.
And you don't realize till after the call that person was maybe 24 hours dead at that time. And it could be within an hour after having the call that you realize that. In other kinds of parapsychological phenomena, we could relate those to crisis apparitions, where you see an apparition of a loved one who you don't realize is in an actual health crisis. They're having a heart attack or they have just died. And you think, well, that was odd, maybe because Uncle Bob lives in Australia and you've just seen him in the living room, or you actually just think you've seen them in passing. And actually, a couple of miles away, they've just died at the supermarket and keeled over, and yet you've seen them walk by the house thinking they're just out for a stroll. And actually, the times don't weigh up. Someone says, well, they've just died a couple of miles away. No, I just saw them walk past the house. They were wearing their favorite shirt and blah, blah, blah. And so it's the same with the telephone call. The call took place as normal. I had no reason to think it was unusual. Maybe when I think back, some of the things they said were a bit final. But you realize it's tied in with the time. It couldn't have happened, but it did. And sometimes when checking, people have found that there's no record of it with the telephone company. In some unique cases, people have even said, oh, Auntie Mary's on the phone. Would you like a word with her? And everyone passes the phone round, as you do when you've got a landline or the mobile and the call. So other people heard them as well.
Wow.
It's fascinating when that happens, because as a medium, of course, I've got one way of looking at it. It's like, oh, that person's visited me or whoever, or that person has wanted to use that instrument, in this case the phone, to pass a message on. So that's my view of what happens. But do you think it could be that we measure time, because we get up in the morning, we've got to go to work or whatever, so we've got to go to the school or whatever, and so we measure time by that. But do you think in instances like that, time is stretched so that it isn't the actual time that you received the call? Did that person make that call maybe while they're making the transition from one stage of life over to the spirit world? Do you think it's something that could be explained with time?
I suppose your question mainly makes me think of people like Professor Bernard Carr. So he's one of the vice presidents of the SPR. He was one of Stephen Hawking's students, and Stephen Hawking only had very few of them. But he's been interested in psychical research for a long time. And as a physicist, he comes at it from a different angle. He's very much of interest in multiverse theory or hyperspatial models. And that actually, we've got all these different levels of possibility, our actions that create different universes. And sometimes these overlap. And we get to see a vision, or we hear something that's actually maybe a different dimensional model, and we just get to experience it. So it's nothing in here in terms of a psychic experience or a communication from the dead. It's just another possibility that we get a glimpse of. So here's an example. It kind of makes sense when you think of either apparitions of the living or some of the unusual calls that took place with living individuals. So Scott Rogo always had one that he put in the book and in a chapter in one of his later books describing the variety of calls. And he said it was 10 o'clock on a bright Thursday morning, and I thought about making a call to a colleague of mine at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. When I thought about making the call, I actually changed my mind and decided to mark some papers instead. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, a call came into me from the very office of the psychologist I had thought about calling.
Hello?
What was that?
What was what?
There's an additional voice on the line. I wasn't sure if someone else was talking.
No.
It might just have been the echo of my voice. No, I think it was the echo of my voice.
I heard it exactly.
I think it was the echo of my voice coming back.
Oh, okay.
Let me go over it again. So 10 o'clock on a bright Thursday afternoon, I thought about making a call to a colleague of mine at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. Although I thought about making the call, I never actually did. 4 o'clock that afternoon, I got a call from the very office of the psychologist I thought about calling, and it was their research assistant saying he was answering my message. When I asked what in blazes he was talking about, he said at 10 o'clock that morning, a call had come into them from me. The caller had left my name and number and asked that the call be returned. And so he'd made the intention to make the call, but then goes and does something else. And for that person that he was going to call, the intention still happens. So maybe you get the same thing with apparitions of the living, where you make a decision and change your mind. And where you were going to go, there's people there that say, oh, I saw you today at such and such. And you say, yeah, I must have a twin, because I thought about going this morning. I actually went and did something else. So are we just seeing another reality playing out temporarily where people get a glimpse of that intention?
Is that another reality, or can that be included in some sort of quantum physics, like the old, if a butterfly flaps its wings in India, there'll be an earthquake in America. All of this.
About a bit of chaos.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, chaos can come into it in terms of calculations of the possibility of these different potentials. I've even questioned before, could you actually calculate when another one is going to happen again? You have an instance of telephone telepathy. You were thinking of someone and the phone rings and it's them. Well, can we calculate when might another one occur, such as calculating complex weather systems, hurricanes, when's another one going to occur? If these are the circumstances in which one occurs, then how often will it be until another one does? It's not simple maths, it's complex, chaotic maths. But for this, it is the butterfly effect. I think some of it gets misled through the TV and film portrayals of what we mean by the effect. But this is certainly an idea of multiple options and dimensions where we get a glimpse into it, and then it just fades away rather than. I think it's best to leave chaos mathematics and chaos theory, which is about different possibilities, but it's not so much about seeing those possibilities. It's more about, can we predict another occurrence rather than these multiverses, and what they mean if we actually experience other possibilities, if that makes sense. When can we get an insight into it?
You look into how you can help bereaved families through your work, don't you? It's tell us a little bit about that, how you do that.
Well, it's not so much with helping them, because I'm not a counselling psychologist, but I am a bereavement specialist through my work. So we looked into after-death communication experiences, which could include the telephone calls. And we even look into after-death communications where people have them of someone that's recently died, but they're not connected to that person. They don't know who that person is at all, but they have recently died. That is part of the smaller percentage of ADCs, but they are there. But most commonly, they are people that you knew, and usually someone very close. And so all I did was just follow in a long line of research that had been done. And my first PhD was looking at the emotion of hope. People had said in popular books on after-death communications that these experiences give people hope, or they'd used chapter titles such as hoping and healing, hoping and coping, things like that, but never really explained, well, what do you mean about hope? How are you defining hope, and how are you saying people gain a sense of hope and use it because of these experiences? Never explained. So I went to positive psychology, looked at what we mean by hope and goal attainment, the predictability and chances of something coming about to your advantage, especially when you work on making it possible. So trying to separate wishing from hoping. Wishing is just a wanting, a hoping is an action where you actually put some effort into getting it, working your way through it. And these experiences seem to buffer your pre-existing beliefs, expectations, what you've read about these experiences, or could completely flip on their head your prior beliefs about life after death, whether you be absolute cynic, skeptic, believer, and so on. So I was measuring that within these experiences and found that anyone and everyone's going to have them. The SPR started doing initial research on this in the 1880s. They'd sent out a postal survey to over 17,000 individuals back in the 1880s, which formed their census, report on the census of hallucinations. It was massive and still reported to this day. And from that, they broke the data down and looked at apparitions occurring soon after death, finding that a week before someone died, more experiences would happen surrounding loved ones and nurses and physicians, loads of things on the deathbed at the peak point of death. And then after a year, they might trail off, but loved ones would still recognize a sense of presence, a smell, a voice, a name being called out, dreaming about them, and many other things as well, even through to symbolic things. The robin in the garden, pennies turning up, feathers suddenly appearing, all kinds of things that had a personal meaning for that person. And then we've taken it forward. So with a research team since 2018, we have sent out another survey. We gathered over 1,000 respondents in English, French, and Spanish-speaking languages. Now we're dealing with Dutch and German. And we've published these surveys and findings out in places such as the British Journal of Psychiatry Open, Omega Journal of Death and Dying, Explore, Evolutionary Psychiatrique, and a number of other places as well. We're churning out so much from this data, and even the German survey that's just about to come in as well.
Huh.
It's great because different people have, or different cultures, different countries, have different views on things, don't they? Different experiences. I know that when you're working in places, say like Japan, which is a place that I've recently been working in, their thought process is entirely different to how we would think about things here. So it's really good that you are sort of looking at not just in one area. You're with the research; it's covering a lot of the population of the world, really, to get their thoughts and feelings on that. Um, is there going to be another a book from you? I'd like to know.
Oh,
Are you working on anything else?
I'm working on. I'm spinning too many plates at the moment, and I'm surprised that I haven't just completely crashed and burned. But I feel like the phoenix. I've risen from the ashes in the past couple of months, and I'm coming back all guns blazing and fighting the good fight. And telephone calls from the dead. That was only 1,000 copies when it was done. So you've got one of 1,000 there, and it went several years ago. And I've just been so caught up with everything that I'm doing. And I managed 8 or 9 PhD students underneath me, and then there's the module coordination, and I've got research grants for the projects. I've just been so busy. So the idea of sitting down and doing a book when I've got all these other papers to be doing, and maybe I need a sabbatical to just focus for 6 months on a book or something, because I've got everything I need there. I've got everything I need to do not a second edition, but a revised version of Telephone Calls to the Dead under a new title. There'll be a lot of the same content, but I'll rewrite some chapters, and I'll certainly add another 4 or 5 and make it more of a permanent thing. It can't be privately published again. It needs to be something that's with the publisher that will do it justice the way I want it to be, and make sure it's out on Kindle and things like that. Something that's got it can last. As long as people want it, it's there to be purchased. But that one's completing my baby. It's my most popular book, and it's also the rarest now because of that. So I need to do something with it. I'm also working on Scott Rogo's biography and Alex Tannis's biography. It was only last year that I was working with Cold Case in Los Angeles and finally had Scott Rogo's murder solved. And it's gone unsolved for 30 years. So I went.
It's great that though you can use your knowledge to be able to help in cases like that. Did they approach you to help, or was it just something you were interested in?
I was working with a guy that works in media out there who's also a big Scott Rogo fan, but he was coming at it at the point of view of media, and we were both filling in gaps of our knowledge. And it was 2019, I was out in San Francisco at the Californian Institute for Integral Studies, and that's where Scott's archive is. And I spent 3 days going through, as quick as I could, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., 32 boxes, just reading letters and taking them out of the envelope and putting them out. I was working through a big production line of just myself, and 3 boxes at a time, 3 boxes back, and at the end going through loads of cassette tapes. And it just meant that I got more of a sense of Scott from what he was like with all of that correspondence, but then managed to get hold of the autopsy report and just thought, I need some more information on this, and started reaching out to Cold Case, and they said that we're going to pick it up again because there was elements that at the time in 1990, fingerprinting every year was getting better. DNA testing obviously came in as well. So it was a new DNA test, nothing on that, but it was new fingerprint analysis again a few months back that actually has led to them being happy that it's case closed now.
But
well, I want you to promise us something, that when you finally do get round to completing the review of Telephone Calls from the Dead, that you let us know, and we'll have you back on the show again, and we'll get that promoted, because it is a great book. I mean, I have read, it's not just sat here, I have read it, and it is a fascinating book. And as you know, because you and I have spoken in the past, that this is something that interests us both, because this happened to my brother. My brother received a telephone call from his father-in-law, who had just passed away, and he told us where the will was located. It was in the record sleeve, and he told us where it was. And he said, "Oh, you will look after Beryl, won't you? You will look after Beryl. Make sure she's okay." So when I spoke to my brother, and I said, who was on the phone? Because he was as white as a sheet. Who was on the phone? And he said, you'll never guess who it was. It was Al. So I said, oh, how did he sound? He said, like he was a very long distance away. Well, he would do. And he'd been gone for a good few hours. You know, he died at the house. He had died there and then was taken from there. And the phone was really quite near to where he died. So it's interesting how that goes. It fascinates me. Things like that fascinate me. Being able to communicate with those who have passed on, whether it is through the telephone or my little system that I have. But trying to get that proof in, I think that's something that is really, really important. So I applaud the work that you do, Cal. I really do. So, you know, long may you continue to do so.
Thank you. Well, I've been given some good kind of like pats on the shoulder recently for that. So it makes me realize that at least for some people, I must be doing some good. So I'll keep going.
Yeah. Didn't you just win an award fairly recently?
Yeah, it was the Diamond Research Award. So it's research and impact at the university. And there's like 8 or 9 different categories of things. So a few years ago, I got one through the same award system for it was public engagement and industry. So it's my media work, TV and radio for psychology. Yeah. And then this year, last Friday, I got one for excellence in doctoral supervision. So that was for all my PhD students who were pretty much all working on aspects of parapsychology.
Excellent.
That is really fantastic.
So I must be fun to work with.
Well, you're certainly fun to interview.
Thank you.
You're a wealth of knowledge and you're very, very dynamic, and it's really good. But now you see, I have this image because of telephone calls from the dead. In the afterlife, there's a big lineup for all the telephone booths that they have up there in the clouds going, okay, I'm next. I'm next.
Yeah. So I've got to go now. My pips are going. They're going to get that. Bye, 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 bye. That's
and our pips are just about to go as well, Cal.
It's your only 25 cents or your 50p. That's all you get.
I know. Oh, dear.
We definitely have to have you back on. You are such fun to talk to, and you are so knowledgeable. You know, you have a brilliant mind, and I love the way that you think.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cal.
Thank you so much, Cal.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.